He found her fighting vultures off her dead mother. Warrior fired skyward and said, "You're with me now." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The morning was quiet, the air still and heavy with the scent of earth and blood. A small campfire flickered weakly in the distance, but the real battle raged not far from it. Amid the open plains of what was once a familiar hunting ground, a young woman found herself locked in an unwinnable struggle. Her body, weak from hunger and exhaustion, trembled as she swung her arms to fend off the scavengers circling above. Vultures, drawn to the smell of death, landed in eerie silence on the remains of her mother. With desperate resolve, the girl fought back, swatting the birds away, but the more she fought, the more they came, drawn by the lifeless form beneath her. Her mother, the woman who had cared for her, now lay cold and unrecognizable in the dirt. The young girl's cries were lost to the wind, drowned by the shrieking vultures, as she desperately protected what was left of her family. Each swing of her arm, each desperate move, was a battle for survival, but she knew deep down that this was a fight she could not win alone. Just as the vultures seemed to be closing in for the final strike, a shadow fell over her. A figure approached, tall and strong, moving swiftly with the ease of someone used to navigating this harsh, unforgiving terrain. His boots barely made a sound on the dry earth, but his presence was unmistakable. The warrior watched her struggle for a moment, his eyes narrowed, assessing the situation with the calm of someone who had seen much worse. With a swift motion, he drew his bow, pulling back the arrow and letting it fly with deadly precision. It struck the nearest vulture, sending the bird spiraling away. He fired again and again, each shot finding its mark, until the remaining vultures had retreated, their hunger unmet. The girl's breath caught in her throat as the last of the vultures vanished into the sky. She looked up at the stranger, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He was a warrior, his face painted with symbols she did not recognize, his presence commanding and silent. He stood tall, a figure of strength in a world that had shown her nothing but brutality. His voice was soft but firm as he spoke, his words carrying the weight of authority. "You're with me now." The girl stumbled back, the realization of what had just happened sinking in. She was no longer alone. The warrior had saved her, but what would become of her now? She had no home, no family, no place left to go. As she looked into his eyes, she knew that this encounter was not just about survival. It was the beginning of something new, something far more complex. The warrior had not just saved her life, he had changed her fate. The question now was not just how she would survive, but who she would become in this world, with a warrior by her side. And so, with the vultures gone and the wind shifting, the young girl found herself at a crossroads, no longer a victim of circumstance, but a survivor, with a protector who had just begun to alter the course of her life. The warrior did not speak as he helped the girl to her feet. His eyes were steady, calculating the gravity of the situation. The vultures had retreated, but the weight of what had happened hung heavy in the air. The girl's face was pale with exhaustion, her clothes torn from the struggle, and her hands still shook from the fear and the loss she had just endured. She stared at the warrior, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. He had saved her, yes, but why? What would become of her now? The silence between them stretched, thick with questions that neither of them dared to voice. The warrior moved first, his presence a quiet force as he turned and gestured for her to follow. His movements were deliberate, controlled, as if he had done this countless times before. She hesitated for only a moment before falling and stepped behind him, her heart racing with a mix of fear and curiosity. She had no choice but to follow him. After all, he was her only chance of survival now. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the sun beating down relentlessly on the parched earth. The warrior led her to a small, hidden encampment, nestled in the shelter of a cluster of trees. It was a place she had never seen before, one that seemed far removed from the world she had known. As they approached, several other figures emerged from the shadows, their faces painted and their eyes wary. The warriors of the tribe, she realized. They watched her with a mix of suspicion and curiosity, sizing her up as she approached the camp. The warrior who had saved her did not introduce her. He simply gestured to a small fire where a woman sat, grinding herbs into a stone bowl. The woman looked up, her eyes narrowing as she examined the girl with a careful, practiced gaze. Without a word, the woman stood, walking toward the girl with deliberate steps. She motioned for the girl to sit. Hesitant but too tired to protest, the girl sat down by the fire, her body heavy with fatigue. The woman's hands were gentle as she examined the girl's arms, her fingers pressing lightly against bruises and cuts. She worked with the calm precision of someone who had treated many injuries before, but the girl could not help but feel the weight of the unspoken question in the air. Who was she, and what was she doing here? The woman finished her examination, her expression unreadable. She nodded to herself, then turned to the warrior, speaking in a language the girl did not understand. The warrior's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "She is safe here," he said, his words clipped, but the weight of them settled over the camp like a heavy blanket. The woman gave a slight nod and moved away, leaving the girl alone with the warrior. The girl stared into the fire, the warmth of it doing little to ease the chill in her bones. She had lost everything. Her mother, her home, her past. And now, she was here, in this strange place, with people she did not know and a future she could not imagine. The warrior sat down beside her, his posture relaxed, but alert, as though he were always ready for danger. His presence was imposing, yet somehow comforting. He didn't speak for a long time, allowing the silence to settle between them. Finally, when the night had fully fallen and the fire flickered low, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "You have no place to go, no family, no tribe. But here, you are with us now. You are safe." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of something deeper. The girl's heart tightened in her chest as she realized what he was offering her. Protection, shelter, a new life. But it was a life she did not understand. A life she was not sure she was ready for. She looked at him, her throat tight with emotion. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you helping me?" The warrior's eyes softened for the briefest of moments, his gaze fixed on hers. "Because I can," he said, his voice carrying an unspoken promise. "And because you are worth saving." The girl swallowed hard, her mind racing with questions she had no answers to. But in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer alone. And that was enough for now. She nodded, a small, hesitant smile flickering on her lips as the warrior turned his gaze back to the fire. There was no going back. The past was gone, and the future was uncertain. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could survive. Maybe, just maybe, she could belong. The days passed in the camp with a quiet, steady rhythm. The girl, now with the name given to her by the tribe, settled into a new life she had never imagined. The warrior, who had saved her, had become a quiet protector, his presence ever steady, yet distant. He had not spoken much since the night they first met, and though his eyes carried a depth she couldn't fully understand, they also carried a promise of safety. The fire at the center of the camp burned brighter each night, with members of the tribe gathering around to tell stories, sing songs, and share their lives. But for her, the nights felt long and filled with questions. The language of the tribe was foreign to her, the customs. Strange, but slowly, she began to learn. Days turned into weeks, and she spent much of her time helping with small tasks around the camp, learning the ways of the tribe. The women taught her to weave, to cook, and to gather herbs from the land. She grew stronger, physically and mentally, but she also knew that she was living in a world she still didn't fully belong to. She was an outsider, and despite their kindness, she still felt the weight of that. The warrior would often disappear for hours, leaving her to her thoughts, but each time he returned, he would always say the same thing. "You are with us now." It was a statement, not a question, and it gave her a sense of comfort, but also a sense of displacement. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, casting long shadows over the camp, the girl sat by the fire. The air was crisp with the promise of an early winter, and she watched the embers dance as if they held the answers to the questions swirling in her mind. She had seen the tribe's way of life, their unity, and their strength, but she still didn't understand her place in it. It was then that the warrior appeared, stepping silently from the edge of the camp, his silhouette outlined by the dying light of day. He walked toward her, his gaze steady and unwavering, as though he had made a decision, or perhaps was about to share something important. He stopped before her, his eyes meeting hers for a long moment, and then he sat down beside her. There was no hesitation, no distance between them, just the quiet connection that had formed between them in the weeks since she had arrived. "Do you know why you are here?" he asked, his voice low, but filled with an unspoken weight. She looked at him, her heart beating faster, unsure of the answer. I don't know," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved me," she continued, "but I don't know why I'm here. I don't know if I belong." The warrior's gaze softened for the first time. He had always been stoic, his face a mask of control, but in that moment, something shifted. "You belong because you were meant to be here," he said. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of something deeper, something more profound. "The spirits of the land brought you to us. And now, you must prove your worth." The girl's heart tightened in her chest. She had thought that being here meant survival, but it seemed there was more to it than that. The tribe didn't simply take people in. They tested them, made them earn their place. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice filled with both fear and determination. The warrior smiled, though it was small and fleeting. "Live as we live, learn what we know, and protect those who cannot protect themselves." It was then that she understood. She was not here just to survive. She was here to become part of something larger, something that required strength and heart. It wasn't enough to simply be alive. She had to prove herself worthy of the protection and trust the tribe had given her. Over the following days, she trained with the other women, learning their ways of hunting, tracking, and protecting the camp. The warrior was never far, always watching, always waiting for her to show her true spirit. One evening, as a harsh wind howled through the camp, a group of hunters returned with troubling news. A band of raiders had been spotted nearby, their intentions unclear, but their presence dangerous. The girl's heart raced. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she would prove herself. She grabbed her bow and arrows, the same ones the warrior had used to protect her, and without a second thought, she ran to the edge of the camp. The warrior was already there, his stance firm and resolute. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly, as though weighing her decision. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. And in that moment, she knew that she was no longer just the girl who had been saved. She was a warrior, and this was her home. The camp had settled into an uneasy calm, the kind that always precedes danger. The girl had trained hard, her muscles sore from the constant practice, but her mind was sharp. The knowledge she had gained in the last few weeks had transformed her. What started as fear had evolved into determination. The night was colder than usual, the wind biting at the skin, carrying with it the scent of something unsettling. The warrior had said nothing, but she knew he felt it too. The raiders were close, and this time, the fight would not be in the distance. It was coming for them. The girl stood beside the warrior, her heart pounding in her chest, but her hands steady as she tied the straps of her boots. She had learned enough in her time with the tribe to know that there was no room for hesitation. Every move counted. The camp had been fortified over the past few days, but no one could be certain how many raiders were out there, or how long they would wait before attacking. The stars above were hidden by the thick clouds, casting a shadow over the land, and the air was thick with the promise of conflict. As the girl looked around the camp, she could see the other warriors preparing in silence, checking their weapons, making last-minute adjustments to their armor. The women gathered together, some whispering quietly, while others focused on tasks, sharpening knives and preparing supplies for the inevitable battle. The warrior stepped toward her, his eyes scanning the horizon, as if searching for something. When he turned to her, there was no sign of doubt in his face, only resolve. "This is your moment," he said quietly. His words carried weight, more than she had expected. She had been waiting for this moment, but hearing it from him made it real. "Are you ready?" The question was simple, but it cut through the tension in the air. She looked at him, her heart steady, her breath slow. "I am," she replied. "Good," he said, nodding once. "Then follow me." The two of them moved as one, silent and swift through the camp, their presence barely noticed by the others. The warrior led her toward the outer edge of the camp where the fires were low, and the shadows seemed to stretch forever. They stood together, waiting. It wasn't long before the first noise broke the stillness. The sound of hooves in the distance, faint but unmistakable. The raiders were coming. The girl's heart raced again, but it wasn't fear that gripped her now. It was purpose. She was ready. The warrior's hand moved to his bow, and with practiced ease, he nocked an arrow, his eyes fixed on the distance. He motioned for her to stay low, and she did, crouching behind a large rock, her breath shallow, her senses sharp. The sound of the hooves grew louder, closer, until the riders appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the dark sky. There were fewer than she had expected, but their faces were grim, hardened by years of raids and battle. She could see their weapons glinting in the low light, their movements precise, as if they knew exactly where they were going. The warrior tensed beside her, and she could feel the power in his body, the calm readiness that came from years of fighting. She didn't need to be told. She knew what to do. As the raiders drew closer, the first arrow flew from the warrior's bow, silent and deadly. It struck one of the raiders in the chest, knocking him from his horse. The others paused, looking around in confusion, but they didn't hesitate for long. They had come for a fight, and a fight they would get. The warrior rose from his hiding spot, and the girl followed suit, her bow drawn and ready. She had learned to shoot quickly, to hit her mark with precision, and tonight, she would prove it. The battle erupted in moments, the warriors of the tribe moving like shadows in the night. Arrows flew, and the clash of weapons echoed across the camp. The girl's first shot found its target, a raider who had nearly reached the camp's defenses. The impact sent him reeling, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow down. She had done it. But there was no time for celebration. The battle was far from over. The raiders regrouped, their numbers slowly thinning, but their anger only grew. The girl and the warrior fought side by side, their movements fluid, instinctive. The warrior was a force of nature, his strikes fast and merciless, while the girl moved with a quiet grace, her arrows finding their marks with deadly accuracy. But as the last of the raiders fell, she realized the battle had taken more from her than she had expected. She was tired, her body aching, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't afford to. As the last raider was tied up and brought before the tribe, the girl stood beside the warrior, watching the tribal leader approach. The battle was won. But the real test was just beginning. The tribe had seen her strength, her skill, and now, they would see what kind of warrior she truly was. She had proven herself in the heat of battle, but there was more to being a warrior than fighting. The warrior turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "You have earned your place," he said quietly, his voice filled with respect. "You are with us now, not just in name, but in spirit." The girl nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. She had fought, she had survived, and now, she had a family, one that would fight by her side for as long as she lived. The days after the battle passed in a blur of movement and purpose. The girl, now fully integrated into the tribe, spent her time learning the ways of the warriors, strengthening both her body and her resolve. But it was not only physical strength that the tribe valued. They taught her the importance of the spirit, of respect for the land and its creatures, and the unspoken bond that tied them all together. The warrior, her protector, remained a silent presence by her side, his eyes always watching, always calculating. He never spoke more than necessary, but his approval was evident in his actions, in the way he defended her without hesitation. His quiet demeanor only added to his strength, and the girl began to see him as more than just a warrior. He was a symbol of survival, of the world she had been thrust into. But despite the training, despite the growing sense of belonging, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something beyond the camp, beyond the tribe, that she needed to understand. One evening, after the camp had settled for the night, the girl sat by the fire, staring into the flames. The quiet was comforting, but it also left her with too many questions. She had come so far, yet there were still things about this life she didn't fully understand. The warrior sat beside her, his presence as steady as the earth beneath them. He didn't speak, but she felt his eyes on her, as if he knew exactly what was on her mind. "Why did you choose to save me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The question had been on her mind for weeks, but now it escaped before she could stop it. The warrior turned his gaze to the fire, his face unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing, and the girl thought perhaps he would not answer. But then, in his quiet voice, he spoke. "You were not meant to die," he said simply. "The spirits led me to you, and I followed. I protected you because you are worth more than survival. You are meant for something greater." The girl's heart raced. The weight of his words settled over her like a blanket, warm and heavy. "Something greater?" she repeated, trying to grasp the meaning behind his words. The warrior nodded, his eyes still fixed on the fire. "You have a gift, one that will serve this tribe, one that will serve the land." He paused, as if measuring the impact of his words. "But it is not a gift that comes without sacrifice." The girl felt a chill run through her despite the warmth of the fire. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What sacrifice?" The warrior turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "You must give yourself to the land, to the tribe. You will face trials, and you will be tested. But you must be ready. When the time comes, you will know what to do." The girl swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had always known there was something more, something she had to prove. But this was something else entirely. This was not just about survival or becoming part of the tribe. This was about something larger, something that could change everything. The next few days were filled with preparations. The tribe gathered their warriors, their weapons, their supplies. The threat of another raid loomed on the horizon, and the warrior had made it clear that the girl's time to prove herself had come. She would face the trial that would mark her place in the tribe, one way or another. As the tribe prepared for the coming conflict, the girl found herself reflecting on her journey. She had come from a life of loss and fear, but now, in the heart of the tribe, she had found something else, purpose. She had been saved, yes, but more than that, she had been chosen. Chosen by the spirits. Chosen by the land. And now, she had to prove that she was worthy of that choice. The night before the battle, she stood outside the camp, gazing up at the stars. The cold wind bit at her skin, but she didn't feel it. She felt the weight of her responsibility, the pressure of the trial that awaited her. She had come so far, and now there was no turning back. The warrior appeared beside her, his silent presence comforting, though she knew he would not speak of the battle that was to come. He never spoke much, but in his presence, she felt a sense of strength that made her feel ready. "Are you prepared?" he asked, his voice as steady as ever. The girl nodded, her gaze still fixed on the stars above. "I am," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Then you are ready," the warrior said simply. And with those words, the girl knew that her time had come. She had been saved, but now, it was up to her to save herself, and to prove that she was worthy of the tribe's protection and the land's blessing. The morning broke with a chill in the air, the first sign that winter was coming early this year. The girl woke to the sounds of warriors preparing, the clatter of weapons being sharpened, and the quiet murmurs of the tribe readying themselves for the battle that would come at dawn. It was her moment. She could feel it in her bones, the anticipation hanging heavy in the air. The night had passed too quickly, and now, the day of reckoning had arrived. She stood at the edge of the camp, her breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. The warrior, the man who had saved her, approached quietly, his eyes scanning the horizon as he came to stand beside her. There was no need for words. The look in his eyes said it all. He had guided her this far, and now it was her turn to prove herself. The tribe was counting on her, and she couldn't let them down. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady, but there was a faint edge to it. She nodded, her grip tightening on the bow she had spent weeks learning to master. She was ready. The sound of approaching horses reached her ears. The raiders were near. The girl's heart raced, but her mind was clear. She had trained for this, and now it was time to face the battle. She moved quickly to join the other warriors, her body moving almost instinctively as she took her place. The camp was quiet except for the occasional creak of a bowstring or the soft thud of feet on the ground. Everyone was waiting. She could hear the distant thudding of hooves as the raiders neared, and then, the war cries echoed through the valley, signaling that the battle was about to begin. The girl's breath quickened, but she forced herself to calm down. This was what she had been training for, and now, there was no turning back. The warrior who had taught her stood a few feet away, his stance poised and ready. He looked at her one last time, his eyes giving her the silent encouragement she needed. He trusted her, and now, it was her turn to earn that trust. The raiders emerged from the trees, their figures dark and menacing against the pale light of the morning. They were more than she had expected, more than the scouts had reported. The girl's heart skipped a beat, but she steadied herself. There were more of them, but they would not break her resolve. The battle erupted in an instant. Arrows flew, and the sounds of war filled the air, the clash of weapons, the pounding of hooves, and the screams of men and women alike. The girl's first shot found its mark, the arrow piercing the chest of one of the raiders who had tried to charge the camp. She felt a surge of adrenaline as she knocked another arrow, her body moving on its own, each shot finding its target with increasing precision. She was no longer just the girl who had been saved. She was a warrior, standing alongside her people, fighting for their survival. As the battle raged on, the girl's thoughts were clear: survive, protect the tribe, and honor those who had protected her. The warrior fought beside her, his movements as smooth and deadly as ever, but he was watching her now, ensuring that she could hold her own. The raiders were fierce, but the girl could see the fear beginning to spread among them. They had not expected this resistance, had not anticipated the strength of the tribe they had sought to destroy. The battle seemed to last forever, but in reality, it was only a matter of hours. When the dust finally began to settle, the girl stood amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, her bow now lowered, her body covered in the marks of battle. She had fought hard, had given everything she had, and it had paid off. The raiders were defeated, their bodies scattered across the battlefield, their horses now free to roam. The girl's breath came in heavy gasps, but she was alive, and the tribe was safe. The warrior approached her, his face expressionless as he surveyed the aftermath. He had seen it all before, but now, his gaze shifted to the girl. He said nothing, but there was something in his eyes, something that made her heart swell with pride. She had done it. She had earned her place among the warriors. "You did well," he finally said, his voice low and steady. She nodded, but the words felt insufficient. She had proven herself, but the journey was far from over. There would be more battles, more challenges ahead, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready. She was no longer the girl who had been saved. She was a warrior, and this was her tribe. This was her family. The days that followed the battle were quiet, but the weight of the victory lingered in the air like the dust that hung low over the plains. The girl, now a fully recognized member of the tribe, stood at the edge of the camp, her eyes scanning the horizon. The wind was cool against her skin, but she hardly noticed it anymore. Her body, once weak and trembling from fear, had become strong, her muscles honed from the constant training and the fierce battle they had just fought. But with each passing day, there was something else, something that lingered in the back of her mind. The warrior, who had once been her protector, now seemed distant. His presence, once a constant source of strength, now felt like a shadow she could not reach. She couldn't help but feel the pull of something more, something deeper. Her thoughts were interrupted by the familiar sound of footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She had come to recognize the warrior's quiet approach. He stopped beside her, his eyes still scanning the land, but his presence, unlike before, seemed almost detached. She waited a moment before speaking, her voice soft, yet firm. "What's going on?" The warrior didn't answer immediately. He stood beside her, his posture as solid as ever, but there was something in his eyes, something that was hard to place. It was almost as if he were struggling with something inside, something he wasn't ready to share. "We have lived through many battles," he finally said, his voice low. "But this time, it feels different." The girl turned to face him, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" she asked. The warrior's gaze shifted to the distant mountains, his jaw tight with tension. "The land is changing," he said slowly. "There is something coming, something we cannot control." The girl's stomach tightened. She had known that the peace they had fought for would not last forever, but she hadn't expected this. This sense of uncertainty, of something on the horizon that none of them could fully understand. "What are we supposed to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The warrior turned to her then, his expression unreadable. "You must be ready," he said. "The tribe must be ready. And you must prove yourself once again." The girl felt the weight of his words settle deep in her chest. She had already proven herself in battle, had already earned her place among the warriors, but now, it seemed, there would be another trial. A trial she wasn't sure she was ready for. The days grew colder as the time passed, and the girl found herself waking earlier each morning, unable to sleep. Her thoughts consumed her, always drifting back to the warrior, to the uneasy sense that something was amiss. He had been there for her since the beginning, but now, it felt as if he was pulling away. He still watched over the tribe, still led the warriors, but the connection they once shared seemed to have faded, replaced by a quiet distance. The girl couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from her, something important. She needed answers, but every time she tried to speak with him, he would retreat into his silence. It wasn't like before, when he had been her protector, her guide, someone who had shown her what it meant to fight, to survive, to belong. But now, it was as if the very things that had brought them together were slipping away. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the camp, the girl decided to confront him. She found him alone by the fire, sharpening his blade in the fading light. The flickering flames cast shadows on his face, making it harder to read his expression. She approached him slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Why are you so distant?" she asked, her voice shaking with the words she had kept hidden for so long. The warrior didn't look up, his movements precise as he continued to sharpen his blade. "I am not distant," he said, his tone even, but there was an edge to it that she hadn't expected. "You are." The girl's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have changed," he said, finally looking up at her. "The battle has changed you. It has changed all of us. But you—" He paused, his eyes hardening. "You are no longer the girl I saved. You are something else now. Something stronger. But with strength comes responsibility. And that responsibility," he trailed off, his eyes narrowing as if he were searching for the right words. The girl's heart raced. "What responsibility?" she asked, her mind spinning with confusion. "The land calls for us," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "The spirits are restless, and they are not forgiving." The girl felt a chill run through her, her mind racing to make sense of what he was saying. What was he talking about? "What do we do?" she asked, her voice desperate for answers. The warrior stood, his posture as rigid as ever. "We fight. We protect what is ours. And you must lead the way." The girl's heart raced. Lead the way? She had barely learned to follow. How could she lead? But as the warrior's gaze met hers, she saw something in his eyes, a flicker of hope, a flicker of trust. He was placing it on her shoulders. And in that moment, she understood. The battle ahead wasn't just for survival. It was for the soul of the tribe. And it was her time to prove that she could carry it. The girl stood at the edge of the camp, the weight of the warrior's words hanging heavily in the air. He had placed his trust in her, but the responsibility he spoke of felt like an overwhelming force pressing down on her chest. She had fought with the tribe, earned her place among them, and proven herself in battle, but now, the true test had come. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about leading them, guiding them through what was to come. The stars above seemed distant, almost mocking, as if they knew what lay ahead. The warrior's gaze was unwavering as he stood beside her, his figure a silent, stoic presence against the vast, unforgiving landscape. The firelight flickered between them, casting long shadows that danced and merged, just as the challenges before her seemed to shift and grow with every passing moment. The time for hesitation had passed. She had to act. The tribe was depending on her, and more than that, she was depending on herself. She had lost so much in her life, but now, for the first time, she had something worth fighting for. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a leader. The morning after their conversation, the girl awoke early, her body still sore from the previous day's training. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of the tribe and what lay ahead. The warrior had not said more that night, but his words echoed in her mind. "You must lead the way." The weight of those words settled in her chest. Lead the way? She was no longer the girl who had been rescued from vultures, no longer the frightened survivor. She was one of them, part of the tribe, and it was time to take up the mantle they had given her. She could not afford to be weak, not now. Not when the spirits of the land, the very essence of the tribe's survival, depended on her. The camp was alive with activity as she stepped into the center. Warriors and women were preparing for the upcoming journey. The mood was tense, the urgency in their movements palpable. It was clear that something was coming, something more than just the usual trials of survival. The warrior who had stood by her side all this time approached her once again, his presence as commanding as ever. His eyes were sharp, assessing her with the same intensity they always had. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady, but the gravity of the question was clear. She nodded. "I am," she replied, her voice firm and strong. The warrior studied her for a long moment, as if testing her resolve, before nodding slightly in approval. "Then lead us," he said, his words carrying the weight of an order, but also a quiet respect. The girl swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She had not expected him to hand over the reins so easily. He had always been the one to guide her, to protect her. But now it was her turn. She was no longer just a follower. It was her time to stand tall. The path ahead was treacherous. The tribe had been tracking signs of movement in the surrounding lands, raiders, animals, and something darker, more primal. The spirits had warned them, and the time for waiting was over. The tribe had to move. They had to strike first before the enemy could reach them. The girl gathered her strength, standing at the front of the tribe as they began their march. The warriors flanked her, moving like shadows, their eyes scanning the horizon, always alert. The women and children followed closely behind, their faces marked by the same quiet determination that she felt within herself. They were all depending on her now. As the tribe moved deeper into the wilderness, the girl's thoughts shifted. She had been prepared for battle, but now, the battle was within herself. She was fighting against the uncertainty that gripped her heart, the fear that whispered that she wasn't ready, that she would fail. But she had to push those thoughts aside. The tribe was watching her, and they would follow her, if only she could show them the strength she knew she had. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of something unfamiliar. It wasn't long before they found the source, footprints, fresh and recent, leading toward a narrow pass between two jagged cliffs. The raiders were close. The girl's heart raced as the warriors fanned out, surrounding the pass. They were ready for whatever came next. The girl's eyes met the warriors, and for the first time since he had handed her the responsibility of leadership, she felt a sense of calm. He trusted her, and now, so did the tribe. "We move as one," she said, her voice loud and clear. "We fight as one." The warriors nodded, and without a word, they moved forward together. The pass was tight, the air thick with tension. They moved in silence, their steps synchronized, as if they had all been waiting for this moment. And then, from the shadows, the raiders emerged, more of them than they had expected. The girl's breath caught in her throat as she counted them. There were at least 20, heavily armed, their faces wild with the thrill of the hunt. But the tribe was ready. The girl led the charge, her bow drawn, and aimed at the first raider who came into view. The sound of battle erupted once more, arrows flying, swords clashing, the cries of the warriors ringing through the narrow pass. The girl fought with everything she had, every skill she had learned, every ounce of strength she had gained. And as the dust settled, she stood victorious, her tribe by her side, their spirits strong. The raiders had been driven back, their threat extinguished. The girl looked around at the faces of the warriors, the women, the children, all of them standing tall, standing with her. They were no longer just her tribe. They were her family, and she was their leader. The victory over the raiders marked a turning point for the girl and the tribe. In the aftermath of the battle, there was no time to rest. The girl felt the weight of leadership on her shoulders more than ever before. The warriors, once her protectors, now looked to her for direction, their faith in her unwavering. She had earned their respect in battle, but now it was time to prove that she could lead them through the challenges that lay ahead. The days following the battle were filled with preparation. The tribe needed to rebuild, to recover from the toll the raid had taken on them. It wasn't just the physical damage that had to be addressed. The emotional wounds, the fear that had been planted by the attack, had to be healed as well. The girl walked among her people, offering encouragement, lending her strength where she could. The warrior, who had once stood as her protector, was now by her side as an equal. His quiet presence had become a constant, a reminder that she was not alone in this. But even with him by her side, the girl couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. There was an unsettling sense in the air, a feeling that the peace they had fought for was fragile, that something even greater was coming. The winds had shifted, and the spirits of the land were restless. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with streaks of crimson and gold, the girl sat by the fire, her thoughts drifting. The tribe had been working tirelessly to prepare for whatever would come next. The warriors were sharpening their weapons, the women were weaving stronger nets and preparing their herbs, and the children were being taught the ways of the land. Yet, despite the hustle and activity, the girl couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was not behind them, but ahead. The warrior approached her once again, his eyes shadowed with something that resembled concern, but he didn't speak of it. Instead, he took a seat beside her, his presence a quiet comfort. "What are we waiting for?" she asked him, her voice barely a whisper in the growing darkness. The warrior turned his gaze to her, his expression unreadable. "The land will tell us when the time has come," he said, his voice as steady as ever. But there was a flicker of something in his eyes that the girl couldn't place. "And we will be ready." His words were simple, but the girl knew they carried a deeper meaning. She had learned over the past months that every action, every word, every movement had significance in their world. They lived in tune with the land, with the spirits that guided them, and with the rhythm of nature itself. She had been prepared to fight, but now she realized that the battle ahead might be something far greater than she had imagined. As the days passed, the feeling of unease grew. The warriors spoke in hushed voices, their eyes darting toward the horizon as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. The girl joined them, sitting quietly as they discussed the signs they had seen. The animals behaving strangely, the winds shifting in ways they had never experienced before. It was as if the land itself was trying to warn them. The girl felt the pressure building inside her chest. She had been chosen to lead, but she wasn't sure she was ready. She had faced battles, had earned her place among the tribe, but now she had to face something that was beyond her understanding. She had never been more aware of her own limitations. One night, as she stood at the edge of the camp, watching the moon rise above the trees, the warrior approached her once again. This time, there was no distance between them. He stood close, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos of her thoughts. "You are ready," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The girl turned to face him, her heart beating faster. "I don't feel ready," she admitted, the vulnerability she had kept hidden now exposed. The warrior's eyes softened, and for the first time, she saw a glimpse of something like compassion in them. "It is not about being ready," he said. "It is about stepping forward, even when you don't feel ready. You have already done that." The girl took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. He was right, of course. She had already proven herself in ways she hadn't expected. She had fought for the tribe, had led them through the battle, and now, she had to lead them through the uncertainty that lay ahead. It wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment, for the moment when she would feel prepared. It was about trusting in herself and in her people, and stepping forward into the unknown. The next morning, the tribe gathered at the edge of the camp, ready to face whatever the land had in store for them. The girl stood at the front, her heart steady, her mind clear. She had taken the first step into leadership, and now, she had to lead them through the trials ahead. The warrior stood by her side, his presence a silent reminder that she was not alone. The land was waiting, the spirits were watching, and the girl knew that whatever came next, she was ready to face it with her tribe by her side. The challenge ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she had already proven herself. She was a warrior, a leader, and nothing would take that away from her. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when the girl stood at the edge of the camp, the weight of the morning pressing down on her. It was the first time in days that she had been alone with her thoughts, and the quiet was a strange comfort. The battle had passed, but the tension that had come with it remained in the air, thick like the smoke that still rose from the remnants of their fires. The tribe was ready, but there was something she had to do. She had to make sure that the path ahead was clear, that she was ready to lead them. Her mind raced, each thought pulling her in different directions. The warrior had trusted her, had placed the future of the tribe in her hands, but now she had to prove she could carry that weight. She could feel the responsibility bearing down on her, pressing at her chest like a heavy stone. The tribe had fought for survival, but now, with the raiders pushed back, the real battle was just beginning. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for their future, for the legacy that would be left behind. The sounds of the camp stirring around her broke her from her thoughts. The warriors were assembling, their weapons gleaming in the early morning light. The girl stood still, watching them, knowing that the next step was hers to take. The tribe's strength was in unity, but the strength of the leader was in her ability to make decisions in times of uncertainty. And now, it was time for her to make a choice. The warrior's voice broke the silence as he approached her. His figure was a familiar comfort in the chaos, his presence grounding her as always. But today, there was something different about him. There was a hardness in his gaze, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. She turned to face him, her heart racing. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady as ever. But there was something in his eyes, something that made her pause. "I am," she said, her voice low but resolute. He nodded, though there was no sign of the warmth that had once been there. "The time has come," he said, his words cutting through the air like a blade. "The tribe will need more than just a warrior. We will need a leader." The girl swallowed, the words sinking in deeper than she had expected. She had fought beside the tribe, had earned her place as a warrior, but now, she was being asked to lead them in a way she had never imagined. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. The warrior's gaze never wavered as he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You must choose," he said, his tone almost grim. "You must choose the path we take. The tribe needs direction, and you are the one to give it." The girl's heart raced as she took in his words. The path ahead was unclear. The raiders had been pushed back, but they would not stop. The girl had no illusions about the dangers that still lurked beyond the camp. The warriors were strong, but the enemy was relentless. And the land itself was unforgiving. "I can't do this alone," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The warrior's expression softened, his gaze no longer cold, but understanding. "You are not alone," he said, his voice low. "We are all in this together. But you must be the one to lead. They look to you now." The girl took a deep breath, her mind racing with the weight of the decision she had to make. The tribe was depending on her, and there was no turning back. She had always been a fighter, but now, she had to be something more. She had to be a leader, and that meant making the hardest decisions of her life. She stood tall, looking out over the camp as the warriors gathered, waiting for her to lead them. She had always believed that strength was in the ability to fight, to survive. But now she understood that true strength was in the ability to lead, to make the hard choices that would ensure the survival of the tribe, not just in battle, but in the days and years to come. She turned to the warrior, her heart steady. "I will lead them," she said, her voice strong. "I will choose the path we take." The warrior nodded, his expression filled with something that almost resembled pride. "Then we move forward," he said. "Together." And with that, the girl took the first step forward, leading her tribe into the unknown future that awaited them. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. But for the first time, she felt ready. Ready to lead them through the challenges ahead, ready to fight for their future, and ready to honor the trust that had been placed in her. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She was no longer just the girl who had been saved. She was a leader, and she would carry that responsibility with strength and honor. The tribe had settled into their new rhythm after the battle, their movements more fluid, their hearts steady. But for the girl, the weight of leadership had only grown heavier with each passing day. She had led them through their toughest battle yet, but now the true test awaited. There were no more clear signs from the spirits, no more battles to fight for survival. Only the quiet, insidious threat of what was to come. The land was still restless, and the tribe's future hung in the balance. The girl knew that being a leader meant making the hard decisions, the ones that would shape the future of the people she had come to protect. She had earned their trust, but she had yet to prove she could hold it. The warrior, now her equal in all but rank, had been quieter than usual. His presence was still a steadying force, but he had taken a step back, allowing her the space to lead. The weight of his absence, however, felt strange, almost like a void she had to fill. She wondered if he had been waiting for this moment, The moment when she would take the reins completely, no longer dependent on his guidance. But despite his silent encouragement, the girl couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. She had been thrust into this role, and though she had fought for it, it was still unfamiliar. The tribe's fate was no longer just in her hands. It was in the choices she made from here on out. That evening, the girl stood at the edge of the camp, gazing out over the valley. The moon was high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the land. Her thoughts drifted to the warrior, to the bond they had shared, to the trust he had placed in her. But now, with the weight of leadership fully on her shoulders, there was little room for those thoughts. She had to keep her mind sharp. The warrior had taught her many things, but the one lesson that stood out above all was the importance of patience. The land, the people, the tribe, everything moved at its own pace. The girl understood now that the answers would not come all at once. She had to let things unfold naturally. As she stood there, watching the stars blink into the night sky, she could feel a presence beside her. Without turning, she knew who it was. The warrior. He stood silently beside her, his posture as calm and resolute as ever. The girl didn't speak at first, unsure of what to say. She had so many questions, so many fears, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to voice them. But the warrior, as always, seemed to know. "The land will guide you," he said softly, his voice steady. "It always does." The girl turned to face him, her heart racing. She had been expecting a different kind of conversation, but his words were as simple and reassuring as ever. "I don't feel ready," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. The warrior's gaze softened, though his expression remained as unreadable as ever. "You don't have to be ready," he said quietly. "You just have to act." The girl nodded slowly, taking in his words. He had always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, his words held weight. She had learned that from him. There was no point in waiting for the perfect moment. She had to act, even if she wasn't sure of every step. "I will," she said, her voice steady now. The warrior nodded, his gaze shifting to the horizon. "The tribe needs you," he said. "And you need them." The girl took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle even deeper within her. She had always known that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about building trust, about guiding the tribe with a steady hand, and about understanding the land and its rhythms. But now, more than ever, she realized that her true strength came from the tribe itself. She wasn't alone in this. And with that realization, a sense of calm washed over her. "I will do what I must," she said, more to herself than to the warrior. "I will lead them." The warrior didn't respond, but his gaze seemed to speak volumes. He stepped back, giving her the space to lead, just as he had always done. The girl stood in the silence of the night, her thoughts clear, and her heart steady. She was no longer just the girl who had been saved. She was the leader of this tribe, and she would protect them with everything she had. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came. The battle was not over. It had only just begun. And as the night stretched on, the girl knew that she had to be the one to guide them through the storm. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension, the kind that clings to the air before a storm. The girl had assumed the mantle of leadership, but the weight of it had not fully settled until now. She had made decisions, faced battles, and led her people through difficult moments. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the camp, she knew that the true challenge had arrived. The warrior, once her protector and guide, had stepped back, allowing her to find her own way. But now, he stood by her side as an equal, his eyes ever watchful. He had taught her many things, but now, it was time for her to teach herself what it meant to lead. The camp was quiet that evening, with warriors and women alike gathered around the fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. The girl sat at the head of the fire circle, the weight of her people's gaze on her. They had followed her through every battle, every hardship, but now, they were looking to her to guide them through the unknown. The land had grown restless, and the signs that the spirits had shown them pointed to something greater than they had anticipated. She could feel it in her bones. The time was coming for the tribe to face a challenge unlike any before. The wind had picked up, the trees bending under its force, and the sky had darkened, as if the very earth itself was preparing for something. The girl's heart raced as she looked around the fire circle, her eyes meeting those of her people. They were waiting for her to speak, waiting for her to give them direction. The weight of it all threatened to suffocate her, but she had been prepared for this moment. The warrior, standing at her side, gave her a silent nod of encouragement. His eyes were steady, but she could sense the unspoken understanding between them. This was her time to lead, to make the hard choices, to guide them through what was to come. "We have faced many challenges," she began, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "But what lies ahead will test us in ways we cannot yet understand." She paused, looking around the circle at the faces of her people. The firelight flickered, casting shadows across their expressions, but their eyes were full of trust. "The spirits have spoken, and the land is restless. We are not alone in this. There are forces beyond our control, and it is up to us to stand against them." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The warriors shifted, their faces hardening with resolve. The women nodded, their determination clear. They knew that the time for waiting was over. The girl could feel the tension building within her. She had not only to prepare her people for battle, but to prepare herself for the trials that lay ahead. "We will not run," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "We will face whatever comes, and we will do it together. We are stronger than any enemy that might come against us. We are one. We are a tribe, and we will protect this land, our home, with everything we have." The fire crackled as she spoke, the words flowing from her with more certainty than she had expected. Her people, her tribe, would follow her. They had already shown that they trusted her, but now, she had to prove that she could lead them through the storm. The warriors stood as one, their faces set, ready for whatever would come. The women, too, rose, their hands steady as they began preparing their weapons and supplies. The girl could feel the pulse of the tribe as they moved in unison, preparing for the unknown, ready to stand together against whatever darkness awaited them. The warrior stepped forward, his eyes meeting hers, and in that moment, she understood what he had meant when he said that she had to lead. It was not just about fighting. It was about bringing them together, about uniting them in purpose, in strength, in spirit. He did not need to say anything. His presence alone was enough. As the tribe readied itself for the trials to come, the girl felt a sense of calm wash over her. The path ahead was unclear, and the future uncertain, but one thing was certain. She would lead them, just as she had promised. She was no longer just a girl who had been saved. She was a leader, a warrior, and the tribe's strength now rested in her hands. The night grew darker, the wind howling through the trees, but the girl's heart was steady. She had been chosen for this moment, and she would not falter. The storm was coming, but she would face it with her people by her side. The days that followed were filled with anticipation and preparation, the tribe working tirelessly to strengthen their defenses and gather resources. The girl, now fully in her role as leader, felt the weight of the responsibility more than ever. She had led them to victory before, but this time, the stakes were higher. The enemy that approached was not like the raiders they had fought before. It was something more insidious, something she could not fully comprehend, but one thing was certain. It was coming. The land was restless, the spirits uneasy, and the tribe's future hung in the balance. The girl could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, as though the very ground was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The warriors gathered in silence, their faces grim but resolute. The women worked alongside them, weaving stronger nets, gathering herbs, preparing food, and supplies for the long journey ahead. It was all happening too quickly, but the girl knew there was no turning back. The time for waiting was over. She had to act. The warrior who had once been her protector now stood by her side as an equal, his silent strength a steady presence in the chaos. He had always been there, a guiding force in the background, but now, it was her time to stand at the front. She had earned the respect of the tribe, and now, she had to prove that she could lead them through the storm that was approaching. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the camp, the girl stood at the edge, watching the horizon. She could sense it. The storm was not just a physical one. It was a test of everything she had become. The tribe was looking to her, their trust in her unwavering. But she could feel the doubt creeping in. Was she truly ready to lead them? Was she strong enough to guide them through the darkest days yet to come? The warrior approached her, his footsteps silent as always, and stood beside her. He didn't speak at first, allowing the silence to settle between them. The girl turned to him, her heart heavy with the weight of the decisions she had to make. "I've never felt this way before," she admitted, her voice low. "I'm not sure I'm ready." The warrior turned to her, his eyes steady, his expression unreadable, but his presence, as always, was reassuring. "You don't have to be," he said quietly. "You are already ready. It's not about waiting for the right moment. It's about stepping forward, even when you don't feel ready. You have already done that." The girl looked at him, her heart swelling with both uncertainty and determination. She had come so far. She had fought for her place, had earned the trust of the tribe, and now, it was time to lead them through whatever came next. "I will step forward," she said, her voice stronger now. "For the tribe. For our people." The warrior gave her a small, approving nod, and without another word, he stepped back, giving her the space to lead. The girl turned toward the tribe, feeling the weight of their eyes on her, but also the strength of their support. They were ready to follow her, but now, it was up to her to guide them. The night stretched on, the stars twinkling overhead, and the girl knew that the coming days would be the hardest she had ever faced. But as she stood there, her heart steady, she understood something deeper. Leadership was not about having all the answers. It was about trusting herself, trusting her people, and knowing that together, they could face anything. The warrior's words echoed in her mind. "You have already done that." She had taken the first step into leadership, and now, she would take the next. She would lead them into the future, no matter how uncertain it seemed. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the girl knew that the tribe would face the storm together. And she, as their leader, would guide them with strength, with courage, and with the unwavering belief that they would survive. They had already proven that they could stand together, and now, they would prove that nothing could break their bond. The battle ahead would be fierce, but the girl had learned that true strength did not come from fighting alone. It came from standing with those who believed in her, who believed in the tribe, and who were ready to face whatever came next. The storm was coming, but she was ready. She was not just the girl who had been saved. She was the leader who would protect her people, who would carry them through the darkest of times. And with that, she turned, ready to face whatever lay ahead.